Okay, think about this for a second. What if the way we usually picture school, especially moral education, is sort of backward?
That feeling, yeah. Like learning stuff you know you'll never actually use.
Exactly. Or that being good in school just meant, don't run, don't chew gum,
Yeah.
following rules.
Right. A real disconnect between the knowledge part and the acting part, and between school rules and, well, real character.
Totally. It makes you wonder what's the point beyond the tests. So today we're going to dive into a source that tackled this head on more than 100 years ago, but honestly, it feels incredibly relevant, maybe even radical right now.
John Dewey's Moral Principles in Education.
It's a classic, yeah, but when you hold its ideas up against how a lot of schools work today, it's pretty striking.
It really is. So our mission here is to take your source Dewey's book and really unpack his big idea. He's basically arguing that moral education, it's not a class, it's not a list of rules.
No, it's woven into everything. The school's purpose, how it runs like a little society, even what subjects are taught and how. So what insights does this old book hold for your understanding of how we learn, how character develops? Let's get into it.
Okay, so Dewey kicks things off with this distinction. It seems small at first, but it's like the foundation for everything else.
Okay.
He separates just having ideas about morality, knowing definitions, like what honesty means.
Right, the dictionary definition.
Exactly. He separates that from having moral ideals.
Ah, okay, so moral ideas aren't just knowing about good stuff.
Not necessarily. For Dewey, a moral idea is any idea about anything that actually takes effect in how you behave and makes your conduct better.
So it's an idea that moves you, that changes what you do.
Precisely. It has to become a moving idea, a motive force. It's not enough just to know something intellectually.
Okay, that makes sense.
And this is huge because it means, maybe having a specific ethics class has some value, but it's real influence. Pretty small, Dewey thinks, if those ideas just stay abstract.
So the real moral purpose of the school isn't adding a class, it's making sure that everything you learn in any subject,
Math, science, history, whatever.
like it connects so deeply with your character that it becomes one of these working forces in behavior.
Right, which suddenly makes the moral purpose universal and dominant in all instruction. It's not tucked away in a corner.
So those teachers who feel like they're teaching morality all day long, no matter the subject.
They're right, in principle anyway. It all depends on how they teach and the kind of environment they create. Is the learning actually impacting how students act?
Okay, so if learning needs to become this working force, where does it get its power? Dewey seems to say from the environment itself, the school community.
Yes, this is where it gets really interesting. He says, the school isn't just in society. It is society, a form of it.
And that changes everything for its moral role.
It raises a big question, right? Should you have one set of ethics for school and another for real life? Absolutely not. Conduct is conduct. Principles are principles. The school's core moral job is to society, helping maintain it, helping it progress.
But he thought the usual idea of training for citizenship was way too narrow.
Oh, definitely. Just teaching kids to vote smart or obey laws, that's not enough. Why? Because the child is an organic whole, he says. Meaning you can't just train one little part of them, the citizen part. Education has to prep them for all their roles in life, as a family member, as someone contributing work, as part of a community.
So you need training in science, art, work habits, being helpful, the whole picture.
And crucially, especially for a democracy that's supposed to change and improve, kids need more than just obedience. They need the power of self-direction.
The ability to manage themselves.
Yes, and even the power of directing others.
Yeah.
The ability to not just adapt to change, but to actually shape and direct it. That's not just for elites, that's for everyone participating.
He makes that point so vividly about the school needing to be a vital social institution in itself.
Right. It has to reproduce within itself typical conditions of social life. Otherwise,
It's like that story he tells about teaching swimming.
exactly. Teaching swimming theory on dry land. The student gets all the instruction, knows all the moves,
And then jumps in the water and sinks.
sinks. It seems so obvious, but think about it. How many schools feel more like learning about life than actually living socially within the school?
And he connects that separation directly to why moral training often fails.
Yeah, he says it makes moral training either pathological or formal,
Pathological. How so?
because it ends up just focusing on fixing wrongdoing, based on school rules, rules that might be totally arbitrary, disconnected from real social needs or consequences.
Unformal.
Formal, because the habits you learn are just school duties, things you do because the teacher said so, or it's the rule.
Yeah.
They're not like life duties that come naturally from being part of a group working together, like chores in a family, for example.
So the real goal should be cultivating this deep interest in community welfare.
Yes. An interest that connects school habits to something bigger, something real. It's intellectual, practical, and emotional. Feeling like you're part of something and invested in it.
Okay, so the school needs to be a community. That's huge. But Dewey goes even further, right? It's not just the environment, it's the way we teach. The methods themselves have a moral weight.
Precisely. The whole spirit of how lessons happen matters.
Yeah.
He draws this contrast between methods that are all about absorption and mere learning.
Like kids just soaking things up passively.
Right. Versus methods that emphasize construction and giving out, being active.
And he was really critical of that model where everyone does the exact same worksheet at the exact same time, and it's all about who did better than whom.
Yeah, that individualistic approach. He pointed out there's next to no opportunity for any social division of labor. If everyone's doing the identical thing, why would you share? Why collaborate?
There's no need.
Exactly. He argues it actually atrophies the social spirit because there's no genuine reason to communicate or contribute your unique bit when everyone supposedly has the same stuff from the teacher or the book.
Wow. And he thought this competitive setup actively bred bad motives.
He did. Things like fear of messing up, fear of not getting approval, and especially emulation and rivalry. The whole focus becomes beating the other person.
So the smart kids glory, not in their strength, but in the fact that they are stronger.
Yeah, they take pleasure in others failing, and the other kids just feel constantly inadequate. It forces this individualistic competition onto things like learning and art, which he felt should be about cooperation and sharing.
He also wasn't a fan of motivating kids mainly by dangling future rewards, right? Like, do this so you can pass the test, get promoted, get into a good college.
No, he called that a moral waste. For one, it encourages putting things off. But more importantly, he felt it mostly appeals to kids already driven by that egoistic desire to get ahead.
The naturally competitive ones.
Right. The kids with more, maybe generous natures, they don't respond as much to that kind of pressure, he thought.
So what's the alternative? What methods did he like?
Methods that tap into the child's active powers, their desire to build, to make things, to create.
Hands-on stuff.
Often, yeah. Things like manual training, science labs, art projects. Activities where the focus shifts. He said it shifts the ethical gravity from an absorption which is selfish to a service which is social.
Because you're making something, maybe something others can use or appreciate.
Exactly. You're contributing, not just consuming. It bridges that awful divorce between learning and doing he saw everywhere.
Okay, so community matters, how you teach matters. What about what you teach? The curriculum. That's not morally neutral either.
Definitely not. Dewey says the subject matter used in school life is fundamental. It shapes the whole general atmosphere and even dictates the methods you can use. A barren course of study, something dry and disconnected.
Can't really support a lively, social, active way of learning.
Right. It forces you back into absorption.
So how should we think about subjects like history or geography from this moral angle?
We need to see them as means of bringing the child to realize the social scene of action. He hated the way subjects were put in these neat little pigeonholes.
Like science is here, history is there, geography over there.
Yeah. Taught from separate books, like they have nothing to do with each other. He argued they're all just different ways of looking at the same thing. The conscious experience of man, organized to help us understand and act in the social world.
He had specific examples, right? Like geography isn't just memorizing capitals.
No. He said its real point, its essence, is grasping how people, or groups of people, are both separated and connected by their physical environment.
Ah, so how does the land shape how people live and interact?
Exactly. It's the world as the scene of social interaction. Rivers, mountains, why do they matter? Ultimately, it's social. How do they help or hinder people connecting, trading, living together?
And history. Not just a list of dates and dead kings.
God, no. History is vital only according as it is, or is not, presented from the sociological standpoint. Its job is to be a means of understanding the present.
How does it do that?
Well, maybe by looking at type phases, like studying ancient Greece to understand roots of art, or Rome for law, things that are part of our present, Or looking at simpler societies to see basic social forces more clearly.
Or using the past to get some perspective on our own times.
Yes. And focusing on the big shifts, the inventions, the discoveries, the new ways of living that really change things. How did society evolve? But, he warned, don't just tell exciting stories about heroes.
You have to connect them to the community life behind them.
Right. What social forces made them possible? How did they influence the group? It's always about the social context.
Okay, but what about something like math? That seems pretty abstract. Does that have a social angle?
He argues it does. Math is fundamentally a social tool. It developed to help people solve practical, often social, problems. When you disconnect it completely from how it's used in life, it becomes unduly abstract. He thought it was absurd to teach kids complex stuff like interest rates, banking, brokerage.
Without giving them any feel for the social realities involved.
Exactly. It's that swimming lesson without water all over again. They might learn the formulas, but they don't really get it because it's detached from any social meaning or application.
So the whole point of the curriculum, really, is to build habits of social imagination and conception, seeing the world and knowledge through that social lens.
Perfectly put. And he wraps this all up, the community, the methods, the curriculum, with what he calls the moral trinity of the school.
The moral trinity. Sounds important.
It is. It's the demand for social intelligence, understanding the social world, social power, being able to act effectively within it, and social interests, genuinely caring about it.
And these aren't subjects you teach. They're outcomes of the whole educational experience done right.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
They grow out of the school, being a community, using active methods, and having a socially meaningful curriculum.
Okay, this is comprehensive. We've got the social environment, the what and how of the school. Now, let's zoom in on the individual kid, the psychological side. How does all this actually shape a person's character?
Right. Because ultimately, Dewey says, all our actions spring from our native instincts and impulses. We're born with certain drives, energies.
And education has to work with those.
It has to. If you ignore them, if you try to just impose morals from the outside, it's just mechanical imitation. It looks like good behavior, maybe, but it's ethically dead. There's no inner conviction.
So when we see a child acting spontaneously, we shouldn't just judge it as good or bad.
No, we should see it as a symptom, as material.
Yeah.
It shows us the raw energy, the inclinations we have to work with to shape towards something better.
And the stuff learned in class, the subject matter, only becomes truly moral when?
When it gets made over into terms of the individual's own activities, habits, and desires, it has to connect with them, become part of their way of thinking and acting. It's an internal process, not just putting info in their heads.
This leads to his idea of character. And it's not static, right? Not just are they good or bad, but something dynamic.
Yes, he talks about character as a system of working forces. It's about potential, about capacity, about how someone operates in the world.
And he breaks down that working force into parts.
3 essential parts, he argues. First, force or efficiency in execution.
Meaning?
Having initiative, persistence, courage, industry. Basically, the power to stand up and count for something, to actually get things done, not just have good intentions.
So it's the energy, the drive to act.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But pure force, undirected, can be, problematic.
Right. Needs guidance.
Which brings in the second part, judgment or good sense.
Wisdom.
Kind of. It's knowledge applied.
Yeah.
The ability to size up a situation, to figure out what's likely to work and what isn't, to connect your goals to the actual reality you're facing. Abstract knowledge of right and wrong isn't enough, because real life is messy, concrete.
So you need the power to act and the sense to act effectively. Force and judgment.
Yes. But there's a third piece, and he thinks it's just as vital. Emotional responsiveness.
Empathy. Sensitivity.
Yes, a delicate personal responsiveness. An instinctive sensitiveness to situations, but also to the ends and interests of others. This, he says, is where we get the raw data for ethical knowledge. Like our senses tell us about the physical world, our responsiveness tells us about the human world. He contrasts the character who might be technically correct, follows all the rules, but is hard and formal.
With the one who is sympathetic, flexible, and open.
Right. And we naturally trust and prefer the second one, don't we? Because they can navigate complex human situations better than someone just rigidly applying rules.
Wow, okay. So a truly moral character, that dynamic working force, needs all 3. Strength to act, wisdom to guide action, and the sensitivity to understand the human element.
It's the whole package.
Yeah.
And Dewey says, okay, let's use these 3 force, judgment, responsiveness as a checklist. How is our school actually doing at cultivating these?
Like a test for the school itself.
Exactly. First, does it give kids enough chance to use their natural energy, their spontaneous instincts and constructive powers? If not, you get kids who lack initiative, lack force. He says mere inhibition is valueless. Just stopping bad behavior doesn't build character.
You need to channel that energy somewhere positive.
Precisely. Genuine self-control comes from focusing your powers on a good goal. Second, does the school create conditions for developing good judgment?
Which requires?
Practice. Constantly making judgments, trying things out, seeing what happens, giving kids chances to select for himself, and to attempt to put his selections into execution. Doing active investigation. That's how you learn to judge situations well.
Not just by reading about choices someone else made.
Right. And third, does the school foster that responsiveness, that sensitivity? This needs what he calls the informally social side. Just kids interacting freely. It needs an aesthetic environment, beauty, art, access to the really vital in literature and history that connects with human experience.
So cutting off arts or recess or collaborative projects.
You're basically starving that crucial emotional responsive side of their nature, according to Dewey.
So putting this all together, Dewey's vision of moral education being part of the school's very structure, its methods, its subjects, all aimed at building force, judgment, and responsiveness. What does that mean for us now, thinking about education today?
Well, I think it's fundamentally a call for a genuine faith that moral principles can actually work in the real world. They're not just nice ideas or abstract rules from somewhere else.
They're inherent in community life and in how individuals work.
Yes, they're built into the working structure of the individual. There are potentials we can develop.
And those potentials are basically social intelligence, social power, and social interests. That trinity again.
Exactly. And the absolute key for Dewey to making moral education effective is translating these big principles into the nitty-gritty everyday reality of the school.
Every single part.
Every part. How kids interact, how lessons are run, what books they read, the projects they do, everything holds moral possibility if we approach it with this deeper understanding of character development.
This whole deep dive, it really makes you question if moral education is something extra, something you bolt on, or if it should be, well, the whole point.
It definitely challenges that view. And maybe it leaves you with a question to think about. If Dewey is right that things like social interaction, hands-on application, and really diverse, rich experiences are so critical for building character,
Yeah.
how well do the typical structures and priorities of schools today, often really focused on standardized tests, individual scores, abstract knowledge, how well do they actually align with fostering that kind of force, judgment, and responsiveness he talked about? What stands out to you from Dewey's century-old ideas?